Now, I wanted to get to the January 6th rioter, if you will, the judge finding this former government contractor not guilty. It says a lot, and this is the first case like this. And the details described in this case of the video showing an officer doing like waving gestures, and then like so much so that the judge said like it could be plausible. I mean, that could have happened. I mean, what do you make of that?
To this day, over a year since January 6th, Speaker Pelosi has refused to allow to the public all of the video evidence from that day. She's refused to give it to Republicans who have asked for it. You know, this January 6th committee, you would think the January 6th committee would want to see all of the video evidence that occurred on that day, yet they're not talking about that. They're trying to get text messages from Republicans instead of focusing on the actual video evidence from that day. I've seen videos from people in and around the district that were there that day, that were outside, that shows all these law enforcement officers, Capitol Police officers, standing there while people are just walking into the Capitol, not saying anything, not doing anything, not telling them that they can't enter. So I think this is just the beginning of what you're going to see of some of these cases start to fall apart, because the American people haven't gotten to see the video evidence that occurred on that day. And as more and more of these defendants start defending themselves with actual evidence of what occurred, I think the American people are going to see for it what it is. And what do you have to hide if there's not something to hide to releasing all that video evidence that happened around the Capitol on January 6th?
Yeah, all the videos should be released to the public for everyone to see with their own eyes. Clearly, they're hiding something in here. We've played some of the videos that we've had access to on the show of just how, so obviously there was rioters and there was some chaos going on, but other parts, people were like in a single file line taking selfies. Nobody was telling them that they needed to leave. And it was just seemed like really calm and casual in some parts of the Capitol.
Yeah, and I think as we get more information, and I'll say this, when we take the majority back in November and we get the gavels back in January, one of the first things I'll ask Speaker McCarthy to do is to release all of that information, release all that video footage, and let the American people and real journalists and the American public see what really happened on that day. And I think it'll really open up to the eyes of the American people what happened on January 6th and how we've been lied to by the mainstream media to think this was some type of armed insurrection when none of these people were armed. A lot of them were allowed to be let in, and the information from Speaker Pelosi on communication she had with law enforcement officials that day that she's still refusing to give to us.
Yeah, no, and we've been lied to so many times over the years, like Russia collusion hoax, the Hunter Biden laptop, that was Russian disinformation, and all of these things, like several months later or years later, we find out it was all fake news because the mainstream media carries the water, if you will, for the Democratic Party. Anything that hurts their narrative, they don't want to cover it. And I did read the blurb from BuzzFeed, so they did mention this in their news cycle, but I'm assuming that they're probably going to want to move on pretty fast. And I'm sure Liz Cheney doesn't care about this. I'm sure Mitt Romney is going to try to ignore it. They don't want to talk about that.
No, of course not. It'll continue this political agenda that they have. And the January 6th committee has been kind of quiet, not doing a lot of things. And mark my words, come like October, November, right before the midterm election, suddenly the January 6th committee is going to be issuing all these subpoenas, releasing all this information to try to change the narrative of the horrible policies that the Democrats have put in place for the last 2 years that they've been in power, and suddenly talk about January 6th again.
Yeah, and then I'm sure you saw this yesterday too. Conveniently, the House committee there, they referred Trump aides Navarro and Scavino for criminal contempt charges. So they just continue to harass the Trump inner circle, and there's a reason why people in the Trump inner circle don't want to talk, because they know what happens.
Yeah, and it's going to continue. It's this big political bias on Republicans and Trump. Trump's been out of office for over a year and a half, and they still can't help themselves but to go after him, go after the people that were close to him, and the majority of which I'm interested to see what comes of this, because there's probably not an underlying crime. Again, it's political to get a headline to say, oh, Trump people that have been involved in the Trump campaign or in the Trump White House have been subpoenaed, and then everything else is buried as to the underlying facts that it relates to that.
Yeah, no, it's such a scam what they're doing. And we know it's political theater. They're just hoping that they can hang on to this throughout the campaign process to the midterm elections, because they have nothing else to run on. They can't talk about Biden's accomplishments or how the Democratic Party made your life better. They just want you to think that, oh, don't support the, quote, insurrectionist party. And that's all they have. It's disgusting. Well, Congressman, we're going to have to leave it here. We're out of time. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Great to see you. Coming up next, Greg